there is a choice here for Conservative MPs. You can either put up, shut up, rally round, show some discipline, and row in behind the Prime Minister, which may, in its own right, have some impact on narrowing the polls. After all, one thing we all know for certain is that the public do not like divided parties, and they'd like to have a sense that the people in charge have grip and are moving the country forward in the right direction. Or they could replace Rishi Sunak. Now, that doesn't have to be a vote of confidence. It could be a kind of men in grey suits, Graham Brady, head of the 22 committee, going to number 10 and saying, look, the gig's up.
Political headline this morning. Tory pessimists feel like rabbits in the headlights. The paper's political editor, Stephen Swinford, says a difficult week for Rishi Sunak has left many MPs undecided over his fate, while several other front pages report a backbench plot to replace him with Penny Mordaunt, the leader of the House. 62 Conservative MPs have now said they'll leave the Commons at the general election.
So James Heapy,
Douglas Ross,
Sir Charles Walker,
Mike Penning,
Adam Afiri,
Andrew Percy,
Chloe Smith,
William Ragg,
Deanna Davison,
Sir Gary Streeter,
Sajid Javid,
Mark Pawsey,
George Eustace,
Edward Timpson,
Joe Gideon,
Stephen McPartland,
Sir Paul Beresford,
Robin Walker,
Sir Graham Brady,
Pauline Latham,
Gordon Henderson,
Craig Whittaker,
Nicola Richards,
Henry Smith,
John Howell,
Sir Robert Goodwill,
Jonathan Jangoli,
Dr Matthew Offord,
Alistair Jack,
Richard Bacon,
Dominic Raab,
Philip Dunn,
Andy Carter,
Royston Smith,
Will Quince,
Sir William Cash,
Lucy Allen,
Steve Brine,
Sir Greg Knight,
Chris Clarkson,
Ben Wallace,
Trudy Harrison,
Stuart Andrew,
Stephen Hammond,
David Jones,
Sir Alok Sharma,
Chris Grayling,
Jamie Wallace,
John Barron,
Nick Gibb,
Sir James Doddridge,
Oliver Hild,
Mike Freer,
Sir Robert Neal,
Kwasi Kwarteng,
Nikki Aitken,
Lisa Cameron,
Tracy Crouch,
Dr Kieran Mullen,
Paul Scully,
Theresa May,
Brandon Lewis. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? There we go. So, 62 Conservative MPs standing down. And as the headaches pile up for Rishi Sunak, where can he go from here? Here's Alan Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home.
The economy and the Rwanda plan, they want those two things to come to fruition. There's a chance that they're able to get the Rwanda bill through Parliament and to get flights underway, probably, if we're being ambitious, probably in May potentially, but it might be later. And secondly, economic data was trending pretty poorly. We're in recession, but there's a chance that the economic data will start to trend up. We know inflation has been coming down. It's probably going to continue to come down. We could start to see growth. And so there's a chance that the government is able to sell a story of an economy on the rise after a very difficult period in COVID and the cost of living and the war in Ukraine, and that Rwanda plan is working and they're going to fix illegal migration.
Well, let's speak to Kirsty Buchanan, former special advisor to Theresa May and now director of the political consultancy Stonehaven, and Joe Tanner, political communications strategist and former advisor to Boris Johnson. Morning, Kirsty.
Good morning to you.
And morning, Joe.
Morning.
Look, no one particularly advocates that it would be sensible for a change of leadership before a general election. That would be the common thought. And yet these stories will not die down. And now senior members of Rishi Sunak's party, some of his cabinet, are looking at plans to replace him. I'd love your point of view, first of all, on this. Why won't these stories die down? Why could this be a good idea? Kirsty?
Well, whether it's a good idea or not is a very difficult one to answer. But why won't they die down? Because Downing Street has lost grip, basically. It is buffeted by events. It doesn't seem to have a strategic sense of direction. And I bumped into a senior SPAD the other day who rather pointedly said to me, it bears all the hallmarks of 2019 Theresa May. Now, anyone that's been in the kind of sharp end of a government that is in its dying days, it takes on a very kind of distinct quality. It sort of, it creeps from day to day, and it doesn't seem to be able to put itself back on the front foot. And this is what we've seen this week. It's going to get even worse next week with the Rwanda bill back in. That's got 10 amendments that have been laid on from the Lords, all of which the government wants to strike out. I hear dark mutterings from the Tory backbenchers about a couple of those amendments that they might fight on. And there's a potential prospect for next week to look even worse than this week if it's possible. So unless they can get out of this kind of siege mentality that they're in right now and find a way to put themselves back on the front foot, then they're likely to have, perhaps another attempt to remove Rishi from office.
Yeah, which just sounds bonkers when you take a step back and look at it. I just wonder, Joe, whether Downing Street thinks it's lost its grip.
That's the million-dollar question. I think, there's always, when people are in these roles, they think that, things will turn. They think things are against them. They are very caught up in their own world, and everyone else is wrong, I think, is often the mentality. I suspect there are people that are in Downing Street who recognise how bad things are. They're seeing the polls the same as the rest of us are. But, I have some sympathy with the Tories that want to do something, because they are almost, sitting in the back of a sort of coach that's being driven into a very sort of clear car crash that's coming up. And inevitably they want to do something about it. The problem is they've kind of messed up each bit that they've tried to do previously, because this constant changing of power and, quite frankly, a lack of delivery in many ways. I think the reality for the number 10 team is that they're thinking, let's just give it a bit longer. Maybe some of the economic numbers will improve. Maybe there's something will change in our fortunes. Maybe Labour will have some mishap. And in reality, I think we are at a stage where the polls are clearly showing that the public have just had enough.
Kirsty, is there a danger that a change of leader would actually do more damage than good? We had a message suggesting that the Conservative Party should just carry on until the next general election, whenever that may be, accept their defeat, and then reboot, and then start thinking about how they're going to launch their assault on what would be a Labour government, of course. Can this do more damage than good, all of this talk about a replacement leader?
Yeah, of course it can. I mean, look, the reality
or the
is,
action of actually not talk, but action, if he was to be replaced.
Yeah, so there's two things here. One, it is impossible to overstate the mood of the Parliamentary Conservative Party. Clinical depression, I think, is probably closest to what it seems like to me. But they do all have agency in this. There is a choice here for Conservative MPs. You can either put up, shut up, rally round, show some discipline, and row in behind the Prime Minister, which may, in its own right, have some impact on narrowing the polls. After all, one thing we all know for certain is that the public do not like divided parties, and they'd like to have a sense that the people in charge have grip and are moving the country forward in the right direction. Or they could replace Rishi Sunak. Now, that doesn't have to be a vote of confidence. It could be a kind of men in grey suits, Graham Brady, head of the 22 committee, going to number 10 and saying, look, the gig's up. You don't need to get those 53 letters to do that. But, I can feel and sympathise with number 10's frustration about this. A lot of this is self-inflicted wounds, if you like, from the Conservative Party, the parliamentary party itself, because it simply will not get behind Rishi Sunak. So, yes, things could get worse. Of course, they could get worse. But I think we're in a world where, for a lot of the Conservative MPs, to coin a popular 1997 phrase, we've moved from things can only get better to things can't get much worse. And I think that's kind of the attitude of where the party is right now.
Okay. 3 options for each of you. And do please just coming off the back of each other. Your 3 options. You're advising Rishi Sunak right now. Do you call an election now and, cut off the foot earlier rather than later, as it were? Do you hold on until the autumn and call a general election then? Or do you replace Rishi Sunak right now? If I give you those 3 options, what would you go with? Joe?
Gosh, that's a tough one.
Because these are the options for Rishi Sunak now, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I think spot on. I think the replacing bit, I would say, it's not really the option for Rishi Sunak. It's more about who takes over, because if you're the person that is seen to have ousted him, I don't think you've got any time to do anything to improve the fortunes for the Tory party in that amount of time anyway. And as you quite rightly read out, 62 MPs that are standing down, are they going to have a decision in who that leader is? And actually, what influence are they going to have moving forward? So I would say that, to me, is actually the worst option for the person that takes over. I'd rather lose the election, do the whole oh my gosh, wasn't it awful, post-mortem, etc., and then rebuild, rather than look like the one that cut the legs off of the Prime Minister. So I'd rule that one out. I think, if Rishi were to suggest to his colleagues, go on then, if you want to do it, come and take it, kind of thing, that might be a slightly different route. But then I think he'd go feeling that he'd walked out on the job, which I don't think is him. I think going longer, despite how awful it is probably his only option, because if he goes to the polls now, which I think I saw the last was Conservatives at 18%, it's pretty dire. So he is going to want to throw the kitchen sink at everything to try and get back in, or at least stem what that loss looks like. Otherwise, I think going from the launch pad of where the polls are at the moment, it is a kamikaze mission if you call the election.
Kirsty, so our three options are call an election now, reset sooner, start that route back sooner, wait and call a November election, see what happens, or replace Rishi Sunak right now.
Where there's life, there's hope. No Prime Minister would willingly throw the towel in, if you like, where there's always a possibility of a reversal of fortunes, no matter how heroic that feeling might be right now. So look, if I was advising him, obviously I would play it long until November. I would get a group of people together who I like and who I trust, who aren't in number 10, who and not because the people in number 10 aren't all individually bright, but they're all part of the same kind of siege mentality right now. I'd get some people in who I really respect, and I would get a brainstorm together. I remember, regardless of how much of a missed opportunity I thought the October leader's speech was, the strapline was about long-term, taking the tough long-term decisions for the country. We now have, apart from 5 pledges, most of which he hasn't, met, what is his direction of travel for the country? What is his ambitions for the country? He needs to go back to a core vote strategy, and he needs to come up with some policies and set a direction of travel so people can see what he wants for the country. He's 18 months into the job and we still don't know the sort of country he would like to build. We need some of that vision thing.
Okay, true leadership, which many will say isn't there. I just love that quote. He never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That's what one minister said to Stephen Swinford at the Times, whose piece is brilliant today and worth a read. Tory pessimists feel like rabbits in the headlights. Part of your digital subscription at thetimes.co.uk. Thank you to our two very informed voices. Some interesting thoughts there. Kirsty Buchanan, former special advisor to Theresa May, and Joe Tanner, political communications strategist, former advisor to Boris Johnson. Thank you.